I want you to picture a typical farm right now. Like, what immediately comes to mind?
Oh, probably massive green tractors, right? Kicking up dust.
Right, yeah. Tractors, maybe endless neat rows of seeds planted in the earth, and, plenty of bright sunshine beating down on the leaves. It's this very classic, very visible picture of agriculture.
Mm.
But the reality is that the most crucial farm hands on that entire property are, well, they're completely invisible.
Completely out of sight. We're talking about an army of microscopic workers operating 24/7.
And that's our mission for this deep dive today. We're exploring the really fascinating world of agricultural microbiology.
It's such a great topic.
It really is. We're guided by this incredible article from Laurent Fabian called The Hidden Heroes. We're going to look at how bacteria and fungi are just, fundamentally revolutionizing modern agriculture.
Yeah, how farmers are actually applying these techniques in their fields right now.
Exactly. And why this unseen ecosystem is basically the key to our future food security.
Just to set the scale of what we're dealing with here, before we get into the actual mechanisms, if you go out to a healthy field and scoop up just a single teaspoon of soil,
Just one teaspoon.
just one, you are holding more microorganisms in your hand than there are people on the entire planet.
Wait, really? More than 8 billion organisms in one tiny scoop.
Easily. I mean, sometimes closer to 10 billion if the soil is incredibly rich.
Okay, that is just wild to try and wrap your head around.
It really is.
It immediately tells you that we aren't just talking about dirt as some, inert dead material. It's not just crushed up rocks holding a plant in place.
No, not at all.
It's a bustling billion-year-old ecosystem, like this massive metropolis beneath our feet that we are really only just beginning to fully understand.
Right, and before we can understand what all these billions of microbes actually do for our food supply, we have to look at where they live
Yeah.
and how they communicate.
Because it's not just random, right?
Exactly. The action doesn't just happen everywhere in the dirt. It is highly concentrated in a microscopic area called the rhizosphere.
The rhizosphere. Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly is happening in that zone?
So you can think of it as a bustling subterranean marketplace directly surrounding the plant roots. The plants themselves are actively pumping out sugars.
Like from photosynthesis.
Yep. Sugars and other carbon compounds right through their roots into this zone, specifically to feed the microbes.
Wait, I have to stop you there because I'm a little confused.
Sure.
The plant goes through all the trouble of making its own food from the sun, only to just pump it out into the deep. Why would it give away its hard-earned energy?
Well, because a plant's roots can only physically reach so far. I mean, they're thick, and they can only access the nutrients and water that are immediately touching them.
Right.
Fungi, on the other hand, they grow these incredibly fine microscopic threads called mycelium, and these threads can explore volumes of soil that the plant could never dream of reaching.
Ah,
So the plant trades a little bit of its sugar to the fungi, and in return, the fungi act like a massive root extension, bringing back water and minerals from far away.
that makes a lot of sense. And the sources detail on how these fungi create what are known as mycorrhizal networks. From what I read, these aren't just, isolated partnerships.
No, they're vast.
Yeah, these underground fungal webs literally connect different plants across entire fields or even whole forests. It's basically nature's version of social media, but actually useful.
That analogy holds up surprisingly well, actually, when you look at the communication traveling along those fungal threads.
How so? What are they communicating?
Well, the plants are using this biological internet to share resources. If one plant is in a super sunny spot and has excess nutrients, it can literally route them through the fungal web to a struggling younger plant stuck in the shade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And even wilder, they send warning signals. Like if a plant is being attacked by aphids or a specific leaf disease above ground, it sends chemical alerts down into the root network.
So the signal travels through the fungal web to the neighboring plants.
Exactly. And it prompts those neighboring plants to ramp up their own chemical defenses. They might make their leaves bitter or toxic to the aphids before the pests even reach them.
That is an incredibly sophisticated early warning system.
It really is.
But I have to admit, I'm a bit lost on the practical side of this. If this network is so vast and ancient, why are the sources saying we need to save the soil microbiome? I mean, plowing fields and planting seeds seems like the most basic human activity. How are we messing this up?
We really have to consider what traditional industrial farming practices actually do on a physical level.
Okay.
When a farmer practices excessive, deep tillage, dragging heavy steel plows through the soil over and over, it acts like a bulldozer.
Oh, I see.
You physically sever and rip those delicate fungal mycelium threads to shreds. You are cutting the biological fiber optic cables.
It's not just moving dirt around, it's breaking the infrastructure.
It shatters the entire marketplace. And then add to that the heavy reliance on synthetic chemical fertilizers.
Right, because that changes the soil chemistry, doesn't it?
Exactly. When you dump concentrated artificial nutrients into the soil, you change the balance. You often make it too salty or acidic, which just kills off entire populations of these microbes.
Wow.
Plus, if you provide the plant with readily available synthetic food, the plant stops pumping out sugars to feed the microbes. The symbiotic trade agreement is broken, and the microbial network just starves to death.
You essentially turn a thriving metropolis into a biological desert.
Exactly.
But the exciting part of this deep dive is how farmers are changing their daily operations to fix this. Like, the sources mention practices like no-till farming, where they literally just drill the seed into the ground without turning over the dirt.
Right, leaving the fungal networks intact.
And they're also planting diverse cover crops.
Right. Yeah, instead of leaving a field bare all winter, which starves the microbes, they plant a mix of radishes, clovers, and rye just to keep the underground marketplace fed year-round.
So farmers are realizing that cultivating the soil microbiome is just as important as planting the cash crop itself.
Absolutely.
Which brings up an interesting question. We have this massive, delicate fiber optic network underground. It's communicating, sharing, but what is actually moving through those cables? Like, what's the currency of this underground economy?
The currency is nutrients. Specifically, it's how these microbes feed the plants, the fundamental building blocks of life.
And we have to start with nitrogen.
Oh, definitely.
I like to think of nitrogen as the protein powder of the plant world. It's the absolute driver for plant growth. Without it, you get stunted, yellow, sad-looking crops. But there is a massive paradox here.
It is one of the greatest ironies in nature. Our atmosphere is roughly 78% nitrogen. The plants are literally bathed in nitrogen gas from the moment they sprout.
But they can't use it, right?
Not a single drop of it in its gaseous form. The chemical bonds are just too tight for the plant to break. It's entirely biologically unavailable to them.
It's like dying of thirst while floating in the middle of the ocean. The water is right there, but you can't drink it. So how do they get it?
This is where specific microbes, like nitrogen-fixing bacteria, step in. They perform an incredible feat of biological engineering. These microorganisms, notably a family called rhizobia, they have the unique enzymatic machinery to take atmospheric nitrogen gas from the tiny air pockets in the soil and convert it into solid forms.
Like ammonia.
Yes, exactly like ammonia.
And that ammonia is something the plants can actually absorb through their roots.
Yes, it takes the unusable gas and turns it into highly effective natural fertilizer.
The partnership between legume plants like beans, peas, and soybeans and this rhizobia bacteria is fascinating. The plant physically builds a little house on its root for the bacteria to live in.
Those little root nodules.
Yeah. If you pull up a healthy soybean plant, the roots are covered in these tiny bumps.
And inside those nodules, the bacteria are working 24/7. The plant feeds them sugars, and in return, the bacteria manufacture plant food continuously.
Without needing fossil fuels.
Zero fossil fuels to create, unlike synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. And because it's delivered directly into the plant root, it creates zero harmful chemical runoff into our rivers.
Farmers have instinctively known about this benefit for centuries, which is why rotating crops with legumes is so common. You plant soybeans one year to enrich the soil with nitrogen, and then plant corn the next year to feed on what was left behind.
Right.
But how is a modern farmer actually applying this today? Are they just relying on what's already in the dirt?
Not anymore. Because we understand the specific microbiology now, farmers are deliberately purchasing these microbes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, before planting, they literally coat their seeds in a liquid or powder containing high concentrations of rhizobia.
Oh, wow. So it's right there from the start.
Exactly. When that seed goes into the ground, it already has its microbial partners attached, ensuring that the biological factory gets built immediately.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because nitrogen gets a lot of the spotlight, but the sources also dive into phosphorus.
Phosphorus is incredibly important.
It is. It drives root development, flowering, and ultimately produces the fruit or the grain that we eat. But phosphorus has a completely different problem in the soil.
Yeah, if nitrogen is the ocean you can't drink, phosphorus is a treasure locked inside a vault.
Good analogy.
It's notoriously reactive. It binds very tightly with other minerals in the soil like calcium or iron, forming hard, insoluble compounds.
So A farmer might test their soil, and the test says it's loaded with phosphorus, but the crop is still starving for it.
Precisely the issue. The vault is shut.
So what do we use to do?
Well, for decades, the default agricultural solution was simply to dump more and more synthetic phosphorus fertilizer onto the field. But because it binds so quickly, a huge percentage of that expensive fertilizer becomes instantly useless to the plant.
Or just washes away in the next rainstorm and pollutes local lakes?
Exactly.
Okay, so if throwing more synthetic phosphorus at the problem doesn't work, how does the plant open the vault?
Enter a group known as phosphate-solubilizing bacteria. These specific microbes act as the biological key.
How do they work?
When the plant needs phosphorus, it signals these bacteria. In response, the bacteria secrete powerful organic acids directly into the microscopic area around the root. Those acids dissolve the tight mineral bonds, freeing the phosphorus and feeding it to the plant exactly when it's needed.
It makes so much sense. I mean, why keep buying expensive keys when you have a locksmith living in your basement?
Perfect way to put it. By applying these solubilizing microbes to the soil, a farmer is essentially unlocking the native nutrients that have been sitting there unavailable for decades.
And feeding the crop is only half the battle, right? If you're a farmer, you also have to protect that crop from an endless barrage of soil-borne diseases, pathogenic fungi, and pests. Plants can't run away.
They can't hide either.
So how do they defend themselves without the farmer relying on heavy, toxic chemical sprays?
They rely on their microbial bouncers. Yeah, the microbiome acts as a highly advanced extension of the plant's own immune system. And it operates on a few different levels. First, there's simply physical protection. The beneficial microorganisms reproduce rapidly and form a literal dense barrier around the roots.
Sort of like a sold-out concert. If the beneficial microbes take up every single available seat on the root surface, there is simply no physical space and no available food left for the bad pathogens to establish a foothold.
Right. The scientific term is competitive exclusion. The good guys outcompete the bad guys for real estate.
Got it.
But it goes beyond just taking up space. These beneficial microbes are engaged in active chemical warfare.
Chemical warfare. What kind of warfare are we talking about?
Take a common soil bacterium mentioned in our sources, Bacillus subtilis. This microbe actively produces powerful natural antibiotics that suppress harmful fungi and pathogenic bacteria in the soil.
Wow.
And then there are Pseudomonas bacteria, which are so incredibly effective at neutralizing threats that modern agriculture is literally bottling them up.
Bottling them up, like as a natural pesticide.
Yes. Instead of donning a hazmat suit and spraying a harsh synthetic chemical that eradicates all life in the soil, good and bad, a farmer can pour a liquid suspension of Pseudomonas into their irrigation system.
And it just targets the bad guys.
Exactly. It naturally patrols the root zone, targets the pathogens, and leaves the beneficial soil life intact.
It moves agriculture away from a sterile eradication mindset, where the goal is to kill everything in the dirt, and moves it toward a probiotic mindset.
I like that, a probiotic mindset.
Yeah, the goal becomes cultivating such a robust community of beneficial life that diseases never get the chance to trigger an outbreak in the first place.
Which is huge. But protecting against soil diseases is only part of the story. Farmers today are facing a threat that is far more unpredictable and devastating than root rot. We're talking about extreme weather and climate change.
Okay, I have to admit, I am struggling with this concept from the reading. I can understand microbes making food or fighting other bugs, but how on earth does a microscopic organism protect a giant cornstalk from a 100-degree heat wave or a 6-week drought?
I know, it seems impossible given the scale, but microbes are emerging as the modern farmer's ultimate toolkit for climate resilience. They actually attack the problem from multiple angles.
Okay, lay it out for me.
When water becomes scarce, certain specialized bacteria sense the stress and kick into high gear. They physically improve the root's ability to uptake whatever trace moisture is left, but more importantly, they signal the plant to close its stomata.
Stomatas are the little pores on the leaves, right?
Yes. Plants lose a massive amount of water through evaporation from their leaves. The microbes send chemical messengers up the stem, telling the leaves to lock down and trap the moisture inside.
So they are actively managing the plant's plumbing system during an emergency.
They are, but they also operate on a cellular level. During severe water stress, a plant's individual cells can literally shrivel and collapse.
Oh, wow.
Right. To prevent this, beneficial microbes produce special compounds called osmolytes. They pass these compounds into the plant's roots, and they act almost like biological antifreeze or structural supports, helping the plant's cells maintain their integrity even when severely dehydrated.
That's amazing. And the sources also mention microbes producing natural growth triggers.
Yes, auxins, cytokinins.
Right. I look at this like giving the plant a natural energy drink right when it is exhausted. These bacterial compounds stimulate the plant to rapidly grow a larger, much deeper root system. It allows the crop to search deeper underground for hidden moisture reserves that a normal root system couldn't reach.
The real-world application of this is staggering. The article highlights an amazing story about a farmer in the West facing a brutal, weeks-long drought.
Right.
The surrounding conventional farms, which relied on standard chemical treatments, saw their crops turn yellow, wither, and die. But this farmer had coated his seeds with a specific drought-resistant microbial inoculant.
And what happened?
His fields stayed green. The microbes physically forced the corn to conserve water, maintain its cell structure, and dig its roots 4 feet deeper than the neighbor's crops. He actually yielded a harvest in devastating drought conditions that would have entirely wiped out his farm just 3 or 4 years ago.
It's the ultimate insurance policy.
Right.
And it's entirely biological.
Completely.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, if we start scaling this up across millions of acres, what does this mean for the planet?
The environmental implications are massive. By harnessing microbes to fix nitrogen, unlock phosphorus, and suppress disease, we drastically reduce our reliance on synthetic fertilizers and chemical pesticides.
That has a massive ripple effect. Less synthetic fertilizer means less toxic runoff polluting our local rivers and oceans. We stop creating massive algae blooms and dead zones in the water.
Exactly. We preserve local biodiversity above and below the ground. And it also fundamentally improves the soil structure. All those fungal threads and bacterial secretions act like a natural glue, binding the soil particles together. It turns the earth into a giant sponge, improving water retention, preventing flooding, and stopping topsoil from blowing away in the wind.
And there's a huge component here related to climate change too, specifically regarding carbon. But I want to make sure I understand the mechanism. How does a microbe put carbon back in the ground?
It all comes down to the plant microbe trade we talked about earlier. The plant pulls carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere during photosynthesis and turns it into liquid carbon, or sugars.
Okay.
It pumps that liquid carbon down into the roots to feed the microbes. The microbes use that carbon to build their physical bodies to grow those massive fungal networks.
Ah, so the carbon literally becomes the structural material of the underground metropolis.
Yes. And when those microbes naturally die, they leave behind highly stable carbon compounds deep in the soil, like glomalin. Instead of rotting on the surface and releasing CO2 back into the air, that carbon is locked away underground for decades or even centuries.
Wow.
A thriving soil microbiome is quite literally a massive carbon pump, constantly pulling greenhouse gases out of the sky and locking them in the dirt.
It is a complete win-win. Better crop yields and drought resilience for the farmer, and a natural mechanism to mitigate global warming for the rest of us.
Absolutely.
But I do have a critical question here. If these microorganisms have been doing this exact same job for 1 billion years, why is this suddenly a revolution right now? Why wasn't this the standard practice 50 years ago?
Well, because 50 years ago, we were completely blind. We knew the soil was important, and farmers knew that adding compost or rotating crops helped, but we couldn't see the specific actors.
Right.
What makes this a revolution today is the explosion of technology at the intersection of agriculture and biology. Specifically, rapid advances in DNA sequencing.
We finally have the genetic mapping tools to actually identify who is who in that teaspoon of dirt.
We aren't just guessing anymore. We can sequence the DNA of a soil sample and know exactly which beneficial strains are present and which are missing.
That changes everything.
It does. Scientists can isolate and cultivate the absolute best performing microbes with incredible precision. Agricultural companies are now creating custom microbial blends, highly tailored to specific crops and specific environmental challenges.
That is mind-blowing. It means a farmer in a dry, sandy region could order a specific microbial inoculant designed purely for drought tolerance.
Right.
While a farmer dealing with salty soils near the coast could apply a different blend of engineered microbes that specifically help the crop tolerate salt water. It's precision medicine, but for agriculture.
Exactly. As our DNA tools become cheaper and more sophisticated, the speed at which we can map these biological partnerships is just accelerating. We are building the foundation of a completely new agricultural paradigm.
So what does this all mean? As we bring this deep dive to a close, it's clear that we have to fundamentally rewrite how we think about farming.
Yeah, we do.
The dirt beneath our feet isn't just a place to anchor a plant. It's a highly intelligent, communicative network that actively feeds, relentlessly protects, and ultimately sustains our entire global food supply.
The future of farming isn't just about bigger tractors or stronger chemicals. It's about understanding and partnering with the microscopic intelligence that has been running this planet since the beginning.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with.
Mm.
We've spent this whole time talking about corn, soybeans, and farms.
Mm-hmm.
But consider the technology we just discussed, the ability to map and sequence an entire invisible microbial internet. If we can learn to perfectly decode how trillions of organisms trade resources, share information, and alter their environment to sustain life,
Mm-hmm.
could we eventually apply that exact same blueprint elsewhere?
That's a huge question.
Right. Imagine applying this soil microbiome mapping not just to a farm in the Midwest, but to human medicine, mapping the vast microbial internet inside our own digestive tracts with the exact same precision to cure disease.
Oh, the potential there is endless.
Or even further out, imagine humanity arriving on a barren, dead planet. Instead of trying to build giant glass domes, we use what we've learned from the soil beneath our feet to engineer a custom microbial network, jump-starting a brand new biological internet and letting the hidden heroes of biology terraform a new world for us.
It really changes how you look at the ground you walk on.
It truly does. The next time you walk through a park or a garden, remember there's a bustling metropolis right beneath your shoes. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking for the hidden systems that run our lives, and we will catch you on the next one.